The Penguin released roughly 1 year ago, and it was without question one of the best shows of 2024. This Colin Farrell-led crime drama is everything that you want from a darker and more mature story from DC. Last week I discussed how DC failed a villain with Joker Folie à Deux, so this week it was only fair we talk about how they succeeded with another Batman villain, the Penguin. As we all know, the Penguin is a spin-off to 2022's The Batman. So I want to not only discuss why this series is so excellent and why its characters are so captivating, but I also want to discuss why this show is an excellent spin-off to The Batman and why that is so important. The Batman and the Penguin both explore a handful of themes: trauma, hope, vengeance, all that fun stuff. But the one that really resonates with me strongly in both stories is that of inequality. The divide between the wealthy and the poor in Matt Reeves' Gotham arguably influences every character in some way. This was excellently explored in the Batman film, but all of that was taken to the next level with the Penguin. There are things you can do in an 8-hour miniseries that you just can't do in a 2.5-hour movie. Gotham and its many neighborhoods are given so much depth and life to them. The rundown streets, the trash around the corner, the graffiti on the walls, the soul-draining apartments. The people living in Crown Point and these other neighborhoods feel like they live like rats. It's all contrasted with the luxurious life that the Maronis and the Falcones live. In many of the behind-the-scenes materials, showrunner Lauren LaFranc stated how important it was for her to emphasize this contrast. And as a result, we have arguably the most well-realized Gotham we have gotten in live action. Now, just like any good character study, the settings and the themes exist to support the characters. The three main characters in this show, I would argue, are of course Oz, Victor, and Sofia. Each one comes from a different world, and each one continues to be shaped by this new world they live in. These characters are so rich and so complex that I want to dive deep into them and discuss their journeys. How are they affected by the rampant inequality in Gotham? Let's begin with the titular character, Oz. What is Oz's story about? What's the goal of the series? Does he go on an arc? Is there a strong theme represented through his arc? Well, the approach the writers took with Oz is very interesting, and it's not like anything I've seen in comic book storytelling before. I feel like this series is simply asking, who is Oswald Cobb and why? Now, if you saw The Batman, you'd have an idea of who Oz is. He's smart, he's quick, he's scummy, but we don't get a deeper look into the character in that movie. Despite having such a strong presence in the movie, mostly because of the excellent work by Colin Farrell, he's actually not in the movie all that much. So this series is really about exploring and diving deep into the character, getting into the meat and potatoes of who Oswald Cobb is. What motivates this man? Why is he the way that he is? What are his real goals? Is Oz straight up a villain? Is he an anti-hero? Is he a tragic villain? Is he actually a misunderstood hero? Does he redeem himself? The entire series is about answering these questions, with the most important question being what kind of man is Oswald Cobb. This is a very risky approach to take, because you're banking that the viewers will be so invested in this character that they want to find out who he really is. Keep in mind, The Penguin is not a 2-hour movie, it's an 8-hour miniseries. The writers can't assume everyone will watch all the way through. They need to hook the viewers right from the start. Now thankfully, the movie The Batman exists, and people loved Colin Farrell's Penguin. If they didn't, this series probably would have never been greenlit. The point I'm trying to make is that this approach to the series only works if we are captivated by the character almost immediately. And because we have a pre-existing idea of this character, we are pretty much invested immediately. Now, as the series progresses, the writers consistently show us different aspects of Oz's personality, but the writers often frame these characteristics in one way, and then the ending of the series reframes them entirely. Let's begin with Oz's pride. Maybe Oz's key defining characteristic is his pride. This was the point of the first scene of the show. We get news reports that Alberto Falcone is going to be the next head of the Falcone family. Right away, the audience thinks, wow, this guy must be important if he is the heir to Carmine Falcone. Then, of course, Oz talks to him, and then after being disrespected, Oz decides to impulsively kill Alberto. Was this smart? No. But Oz's pride got hurt, so he had no choice. He refuses to feel belittled or insulted in any way. Now, when someone is like this, they are obviously deeply vulnerable and insecure. Now, just how insecure is Oz really? Right from the start, we can assume he is insecure over his physical disability. It's pretty common that people feel insecure about their physicality. It was a pretty revealing scene a few scenes later when Oz and Victor enter the train. The director highlights that the handicap seat is open, but Oz refuses to sit there. To Oz, he is better than some disability, and he is too prideful to even consider sitting there. Another great moment that highlights this is when Oz yells at the waiter for finishing Victor's sentence. The waiter finishing Victor's sentence to Oz is like if someone asked him if he needs help walking or getting up somewhere. To Oz, an acknowledgement of a disability is disrespectful. So this is obviously Oz's biggest insecurity, and we can assume this is partially what motivates him. Deep down, Oz is so afraid of feeling inferior. He is so afraid that he does whatever it takes to feel superior. In his eyes, that is. But again, the writers are only scratching the surface here. They're only giving us pieces to a giant puzzle. For maybe the rest of the first half of the season, we still don't really dive that deep into Oz. Sure, we see that Oz has a mother and he takes care of her, but most of these early episodes are devoted to painting this broad picture of Oz. What are his strengths and what are his weaknesses? It's the end of the series that gives us answers into why these strengths and weaknesses exist. Let's take a look at his strengths. Oz's superpower is discerning what people want and why. This is consistently how he is able to get people on his side. Oz spends most of the season dealing with people who grew up on his side of Gotham. Since he also grew up there, he knows what these people want. The same thing that he does, to not feel like a rat, to feel respected and important. The first instance of Oz manipulating someone is with his boy Victor. He sees this group of boys trying to steal the rims off his car, and he's able to get one right in his sight. As the boy speaks, who turns out to be Victor, just from the stutter alone, he's able to connect with Victor and discern that Victor must feel the same way that he does, to be insecure about a disability. Now, this is the essential question of the series. Does Oz actually want to help Victor because he sees himself in Victor, or is Victor just a pawn? Initially, we're led to believe the former. Despite holding him hostage in the first episode, Oz is pretty kind to Victor. We see this many times. But is it all just manipulation? When Oz talks with Victor about his father in the third episode, he uses that conversation as a means to dig deeper into Victor's desire to do better for himself, because his father was never able to. This is peak manipulation. He's planting the seed that will grow into Victor abandoning his girlfriend. I'll dive deeper into Victor a bit later, but his entire story is a perfect encapsulation of how good Oz is at manipulating people. Looking at the wider scope of this universe, especially in connection with the Batman, the dichotomy between Bruce Wayne and Oswald Cobb is fascinating. Oz is the opposite of Bruce. Bruce was unaware of how the inequality in Gotham drove so many people to do quote-unquote bad things. Bruce means well, but his privilege as a billionaire makes him ignorant towards how the normal person in Gotham lives their life. Oz, on the other hand, is perfectly aware of how people feel. If anything, he is too aware of this. He's able to relate to that and then uses that feeling to exploit others into doing what he wants. He consistently does this. This is cruel behavior, but because the series hasn't framed Oz as a monster yet, we're questioning what the true motive is here. Does Oz genuinely want what's best for these people, or is he just manipulating them? There's a big gray area here. Sure, we know right from the start Oz wouldn't be helping these people if it couldn't benefit him in some way, but it's what's deep down that we're questioning. On the surface, he seems selfish, but again, deep down, does he really want to help these people? Initially, we start to empathize with Oz because of his perspective on the class conflict. We are attracted to watching him because he is an aspiring mob boss, and frankly, the dark side is so much fun to watch. But the points he's making about inequality are unquestionably fair, and we agree with him. We largely understand what he is saying when he is talking to Victor and the others, how it's not humane to live like these people live. All these conversations Oz has with Victor and the others in the slums are just the right writers wanting you to believe that Oz is some overlooked underdog. Even though he is doing terrible things, we root for him in this criminal world because he is that underdog, right? This is not only how the audience feels, but how a lot of people around Oz feel. This is why he's able to recruit people to work for him. He manipulated them and the audience. He is so good at convincing people that he's on their side that even the audience is beginning to be on his side. We're beginning to root for him. We're beginning to hope that he's just an anti-hero and not a true villain. Sophia admits this to herself. She trusted Oz anyway, even though everything in her body told her not to. This is his biggest strength. Now, what about his biggest weakness? Well, in the world of crime, the biggest weakness you can have is someone that you love, and we believe this is the case with his mother, which is without question the most revealing relationship that Oz has in the series. At first, we believe that Oz genuinely loves his mother and he wants to protect her. How can Oz truly be evil when he cares so deeply about protecting his mother? If anything, this is the sign of a true man, right? A man who goes out of his way to protect and care for his mother? That's an honorable thing. He makes sure that Victor checks in on her and makes sure that she's safe. That's how much he cares for her, right? But then we slowly start to learn that Oz also has a deep desire to feel approval. Now, just because he was a needy kid or because he strongly desires approval, that doesn't mean he's an evil guy. He's just flawed like everyone else in the world. Episode 6 ends with Sophia finding Victor and Francis. Going into the next episode, we fear for Francis. We don't want her to get hurt. Everything changes, however, in episode 7. The writers have given us enough reasons to question if deep down there's a good person in Oz. He takes care of his mother, he treats Victor like a son, he wants to help the people of Crown Point. These are all relatively good things. But episode 7 begins with the flashbacks. At this point, we've only gotten hints to what Oz's childhood was like. We've heard that he had 2 brothers that died, and we assume that this is part of some tragic backstory for Oz. Maybe we're going to learn that Oz had a younger brother who died from crime, and that's why Oz took an interest in mentoring Victor. Maybe his brothers were killed by the Falcones, and that's why he wants to take over and destroy them so badly. Either way, with these flashbacks, we're going to learn who Oswald Cobb truly is. Now, unlike most villains in comic book movies or shows, Oz doesn't have some tragic backstory, at least from his perspective. Yes, Oz grew up with a struggling family and a single mother. These are very challenging things for a kid to deal with. But he did have a loving mother and loving brothers. He wasn't getting abused by his mother. We don't see any instances of severe bullying by his peers. His brothers weren't abusive. His life was relatively stable. He was even able to get support for his disability. There was no tragic event that shaped who Oz was. There was no parental murder that radicalized Oz into who he was, unlike Bruce Wayne. The only problem with Oz was that he was keenly aware of his own perceived disability. Throughout these entire flashback sequences, not once do we see anyone bully Oz or make fun of him because of his clubfoot. Now, I'm sure that at school or whatever, Oz got bullied or teased for it, but it's critical that we don't see this on screen. But remember, Oz is a keenly aware person. While his awareness allows him to be more mature in some ways, it also leads to paranoia. He begins to assume things that simply aren't true. As we know, Oz had an obsession with his mother, likely because she was the only one who never bullied or teased him in any way. Therefore, his connection to her was so precious to him. But remember, he's paranoid. What happens if his brothers get too close to his mother? What happens if his mother gives him less attention? This is racing in Oz's mind. One night when he goes out to play with his brothers, they tell him he has to climb down a ladder in order to win the game. Sure, this probably wasn't the nicest thing to do, but it's an innocent mistake made by 2 kids. So Oz gets triggered and locks them inside. I don't think he thought at this moment, oh, I'm gonna lock them in here forever until they die. He was clearly upset by his brothers and impulsively locked the door on them to punish them. But then he goes home, and he has his mother all to himself. They watch a movie together, and Oz couldn't be happier. He looks outside and sees it starts to rain. As time goes by, the rain gets heavier and heavier. In this moment, Oz realizes the world he could live without his 2 brothers, a world where it's just him and his mother. So what does Oz do? Nothing. He knows his brothers will drown, and he lets it happen. Oz murdered his 2 brothers. He trapped them down there, and he knew eventually they were going to die. There is no ambiguity about the situation, Oz did this intentionally. His brother's deaths were not accidents. It says a lot that Oz never apologizes for what he did or that he feels bad about it at all. He was happy that it happened. This is the turning point in the series. It's here in this 7th episode where we learn what kind of villain Oz truly is. He's not an underdog. He's not misunderstood. He's not an anti-hero. He's a monster. The rest of these final 2 episodes, they begin to unravel everything. All the final puzzle pieces are being put together. By the time we reach the final scene, we understand who exactly Oswald Cobb is. Oz doesn't try to fix the system that caused him so much insecurity and pain, he perpetuates it. There's something sick about being selfish to this extreme, but there's also something even more sickening about someone who pretends to be selfless to hide how selfish they are. And in these final episodes, we learn that is who Oz is. Oz is always focused on the bigger picture and how he can get himself to the top. What Oz would do is that he would often make himself feel smaller to those in power so they would underestimate him. But remember, he is no underdog. He is not someone to root for. He knows exactly what he is doing. He knows he can make these people underestimate him. He knows these people will underestimate him. Also, he can wait for his time to strike. Now, for those not in power, as I said before, he creates an illusion of opportunity. Work with me and I can get you real power. Make drugs for me and I will lift you out of poverty. But the second that bomb drops, he is out there without a hint of remorse. Oz manipulates these people's hopes and dreams. Manipulation is Oz's superpower. Oz is without question personable. That's how he's able to get people on his side. He acts like he cares about others' best interests, but he really doesn't. This is what he did with the lieutenants. He manipulated them through their own quest for power. He told the councilman to scapegoat Sofia because he knew doing so would help the councilman's reputation and position as well. Let's take this all back to the most tragic character in the show, Victor. Why did Oz want to help Victor? It's not because he saw himself in Victor. It's not because he feels bad for the kid who lost his family during the flood. He did it because he knew he could exploit Victor's dreams to his advantage. He sees the stutter and knows that's how he can manipulate him. Oz is merciless and ruthless in his quest for power, and that's why killing Victor was his only option. He was almost exploited for the love of his mother, but then Victor said he sees Oz like family, and that's the worst thing you could say to a sociopath like Oswald Cobb. I think Oz did care about Victor. There are an overwhelming amount of scenes between the two, and it can't all just be an act, but power is more important to Oz, and if Victor is family, that means he is just a weak link. This is the nail in the coffin. There is no doubt to anyone's mind who Oswald Cobb is. Now, while the ending to Victor's story was tragic, the way the ending reframes his relationship to his mother is haunting. As I said before, a boy taking care of his mother is supposed to be the nicest thing a boy could do. But does Oz really love his mother? Does he really want what's best for her like any caring son? No, he doesn't love his mother. She is only a tool to make him feel powerful, a tool for approval. He wanted her all to himself so she can make himself feel competent and powerful. The ending shows us Oz clearly never cared for her. Just look at their living situation throughout the entire series. Oz promised to get her to someplace nice. He said that with such conviction. Meanwhile, Oz was living in a really nice apartment. He had fancy clothes. The man was even driving a Maserati. He had all of this. Sure, he hadn't gotten that dream penthouse yet, but let's be real. He's without question in the top 1% of people in Gotham. You don't casually burn a Maserati if you're not doing well for yourself. The point is, this is just one example of how Oz doesn't care for his mother. He was willing to sacrifice his mother's finger to perpetuate his lie. Why would he care about his mother's finger? She won't die from that. This is also why her tirade at the end about how much she really hates him doesn't affect him. You'd think a mother telling her son how much she hates him and how she has always hated him would break him. This was my assumption too. But no, he doesn't care about how she feels. He only cares about how she makes him feel. Earlier in the series, Frances asked Oz that if she ever became comatose or lost her mind, that she be put down instead of living in pain. But if she was dead, then how can she make Oz feel powerful? How can he prove to his mom that he would achieve everything he desired? How could he give his mom the penthouse if she's dead? That's why he keeps her alive in the end. She is in her hell. She wants to be dead, but Oz doesn't care. To him, it makes him feel powerful. approval. I find it kind of freaky that Oz makes Eve dress up like his mother and get more approval in that way. But again, makes sense. All he cares about is that approval. If you want to talk about toxic masculinity, please watch this show. Oswald Cobb is the perfect example of that. So overall, Oz didn't really go on an arc this season. As I said before, in a way the series was a mystery. Who really is Oswald Cobb? The writers masterfully led us down this fascinating story where we learned how truly evil this man is. In doing so, they created one of the best comic book villains ever put to screen. Now, it's important that we tie this all back into the main theme I discussed in the intro, and that's what the show says about class inequality. The Batman movie explored this misconception that everyone who chooses a life of crime was more than willing to go down this path, that the system suppresses those at the bottom from ever climbing the social ladder, that the higher-ups of Gotham don't care about lifting others out of poverty, only cementing their own status. When kids are put into systems like this, they are desperate to look to someone with hope, someone with a plan, just any sign that their life could be better. That's where Rex Calabrese comes in. Oz looked up to him. Rex is a leader in his neighborhood. He is wealthy. He is respected. He is feared. For Oz, that is the only path he sees he can go down to be free. So that's what he's going to do. Therefore, he is easily influenced by Rex. That's what Rex said to Frances in the flashback. And Frances gives in. She begins to promote her son's behavior. She uses what he did to motivate him to begin his journey. And as Oz grows older, he turns that motivation into a quest for power. Oz is a terrible person. There is no sugarcoating it. And of course, I am not saying that everyone who ends up impoverished ends up in a life of crime. But when you have a system that suppresses millions of people, there are bound to be a significant number of people who do choose this life. Not all of them are evil, but a lot are. Even though Oz perpetuates this system, he is also a victim of it. It's a system that rewards people at the top. And instead of helping people at the bottom, people like Oz will do whatever it takes to get to that top, trampling others along the way. The writing of Oz was excellent. The series created this fascinating character that turned out to be crueler than anyone thought. Oz also perfectly represents the themes of this cinematic universe, and that's maybe more important. Let's now transition to talking about the character that is arguably the biggest victim of this system, and that's Victor. Victor is the most tragic character in the show. He was a masterful addition to the cast, and his death was what gave the ending the emotional impact that it needed. But let's backtrack a bit. As we learn, Victor lost his entire family due to the flood at the end of The Batman. In the short aftermath of that, Victor is caught trying to steal the rims off of Oz's Maserati. He gets caught and is forced to follow Oz around for the rest of the episode. The first 3 episodes represent a mini arc for Victor, and it has some pretty strong commentary. We learn that there is a girl that Victor likes, and she tells him she has plans on leaving Gotham and traveling to California. Victor intends on going with her. It's what his father would have wanted, and it's what he knows deep down is best for him. But what did we just talk about with Oz? Young men and women often look to a person for guidance, someone to follow. Here comes Oz, someone who at first forces Victor to follow him around, but eventually, slowly but surely, Victor decides to join Oz through his own free will. Oz shows him his nice apartment, his nice car, all these women. It's all a taste of what Victor can have if he goes down this path. Many do not see it this way, but Victor's entrance into this world of crime can definitely be seen as a descent into addiction. Why are some of the best shows ever made crime dramas? Because despite knowing all the harm it causes, that lifestyle is attractive. Gaining power, breaking the law, making insane amounts of money, this is very attractive, especially to lost young men out there. In the 3rd episode, Victor is given a choice to either live a life with a girl he loves free from the life of crime, something he never voluntarily asked for and something he knew his father would disapprove of, or stay with Oz, risk his life for a chance he can achieve what Oz has. Victor sits in his car and lets the girl go free. He goes back to Oz, runs over a man, and escapes. Victor chose the life of crime. Is this not the same as a man who decided to get drunk instead of being there for his girlfriend or wife, or doing drugs instead of being the man he needs to be? The life of crime is is addicting. People in power, like Bruce Wayne in the beginning of The Batman, believe these people just choose this life. But is that really the case for someone like Victor? He was forced into this life against his will, and when he had the chance to escape, it was too late because he became addicted. He lost his entire family, and here comes a new father figure promising him an escape from poverty. What else do you expect a young man to do? This is the commentary the show is trying to make. Victor shows that a significant amount of people don't choose this life. They're forced into it, and the system of Gotham reinforces that. Now, the season doesn't end there. There is plenty of story left for Victor. Because the series is mostly focused on such high-profile characters in the world of crime, like the Penguins and the Falcones and the Maronis, the story doesn't get to spend much time focusing on the average person. That's why Victor exists. Sure, there are definitely loads of terrible people in the world of crime, but I think we can all agree Victor is a pretty good dude. He was always kind to Oz, he was kind to Oz's mother, and he was really grateful that Oz made an effort to aid the people of Crown Point. The first time Victor killed someone, who happened to be that dude Squid, Victor burst into tears. Killing is something that almost all the mob bosses gladly do without hesitation. Sofia killed her entire family and she celebrated it. Victor's heart is so innocent and so pure that the first time he killed someone, it broke him. Meanwhile, this dude Squid was not a very good dude in the first place, but it didn't matter. It was the logical step of someone who goes down this path. Had Victor lived for a long time, I'm sure he would have killed a lot more people, and I'm sure each time it happened, it would have been easier for him. Speaking of which, we need to talk about the ending. Victor confesses to Oz that he now sees Oz as family. What does Oz do? Kill him. Why? Not because Victor posed as a threat, not because Victor made a serious mistake that put Oz's life in jeopardy, but because Victor got too close to Oz, and Oz couldn't risk having another close person in his life. In short, Victor lost his life over nothing. And to make things even worse, Oz throws Victor's ID into the sea. So when Victor's body is found, he will never be identified, and he will likely be forgotten in time. That's what happens a lot in these types of systems. Victor posed a risk to Oz's power, therefore he had to die. How do you think other people in power feel? As we'll see with Sofia, she was sent to Arkham for 10 years simply because she was a risk to her father. How many people needlessly die? Also, a few others can gain a bit more power. Victor's story is so tragic. He was a good kid who, largely due to factors outside of his control, went down the wrong path and lost his life because of it. There is no character that exemplifies the themes of this show better than Victor. Let's now take a look at a character that came from massive wealth, but was still a victim of the system, and that's Sofia. Sofia is a powerhouse of a character in this story, so much so that she became a fan favorite, and by the end, many viewers began to root for her over Oz and the others. I think what's so compelling about Sofia is how complex she is. You can't pin her down as a hero or a villain. She is a genuinely complicated person, and given what she went through, there's no question why she's so complex. But before we dive into that, we need to discuss why Sofia's inclusion in this story is so important. With Victor and Oz, despite ending up at different places by the end of the story, they both started from the same side of Gotham, the side of the impoverished. Considering this universe has such a strong commentary on class inequality, it's important that we show the other side of the coin. The Batman had both Bruce and Selina, and in this show, Sofia represents the side of the wealthy. One of my favorite shows of the year was Andor, and there are 100 different reasons why, but one of the themes of that show that I passionately loved was how fascism eventually comes for those in power as well. The oppressors often become victims too. Sofia kind of represents that. Now, she's by no means an oppressor, but she was born on the side of the people in power. Now, to begin her story in the past, she was never a crime boss, never held any real power, but she was a part of a wealthy family. So you would think that she would be free from the political system of Gotham, right? Well, that's not how class inequality works. The only people who don't suffer are the ones at the very top. Sofia is not one of those people. Her father is, though. So despite being from a wealthy family, her entire story is about how even many of the wealthy are victims to this system too. The fourth episode is maybe the best episode of the season, and it's the episode that's entirely devoted to Sofia's backstory. She was a loving and caring daughter who dedicated her life to honoring her mother's memory. She is so beloved that her father is willing to break family tradition to make his daughter his heir. care. But Sofia isn't really cut out for this life, at least not yet. She begins asking questions about what happened to her mother, who mysteriously killed herself when she was young. Sofia begins to realize her mother was likely killed by her father in reality. After one conversation where Sofia passively confronts her father about it, he decides she is a risk to his empire and has her framed for the murder of these 8 women, including her mother. She gets thrown straight into Arkham for crimes she didn't commit. There she is given no due process, no court hearing, nothing. Her father is so powerful that he can send his daughter to an insane asylum and revoke all of her rights just for asking a few questions. There she is tortured, beaten, and abused for 10 years. Sofia was clearly a victim. With such strong class inequality, her father had so much power that he could do whatever he wanted, and his daughter suffered the consequences of that. Now, the social commentary doesn't just stop there. Yes, Sofia suffered in Arkham for 10 years, and yes, that shows how she is a victim of the system of Gotham as well. But what happens afterwards? When she is out, well, she enters the game. At first, she tries to follow the family along and clear her name. Everyone still looks at her with fear and calls her the Hangman. Her own family, who is complicit in her being framed, are also uncomfortable around her. It's not until the second half of the 4th episode where she really begins to break bad. She is so consumed by rage and revenge that she kills her entire family. She gasses all of them. In the Inside the Episode for this episode, the showrunner talks about how Sofia's transition is represented through her attire. In the first 3 episodes, she is dressed a lot more modestly and classy. This is because she is still trying to find her place back inside the Falcone family. But once she decides to reject that, her outfits and even her hair are a lot more risky, a lot more confident, reflecting on her state at that moment. And then for the rest of the series, she continues to dress herself like that. I thought that was such an excellent dimension to her character. Episode 4 was a complete arc for Sofia. She began the episode being framed for mass murder. She then ended the episode actually committing mass murder. Now, unlike Victor, Sofia did enter the game on her own. After she was released from Arkham, she decided to stick around. And again, just like I said with Victor, sometimes circumstances make it really hard for people to leave the game. Sofia was so consumed with revenge that she couldn't just leave. She needed to get that justice. Even after she did get her justice, she still had a chance to leave. But remember, that life of crime is addicting. Sofia had an opportunity to grab power, and she took it. She kept Johnny alive just so she could kill him in front of all the other leaders of the syndicate. One thing starts to lead to another. One moment she wants to take revenge on her entire family, the next moment she decides to take over her father's legacy almost as a means just to spite him. She literally changes the name from the Falcones to the Gigantes to honor her mother and spite her father. Yes, Sofia made decisions of her own free will, but she was funneled into making these decisions due to factors outside of her control. That is what Sofia's story says about class inequality. The powerful become so powerful that even people like Sofia can be pushed down the wrong path. Episode 4 was a masterclass, but thankfully Sofia's story is excellent in the other 7 episodes. Sofia is a perfect foil to Oz, because her story mirrors Oz's in a handful of ways. When the series begins, we're questioning what kind of person Sofia really is. Is she as crazy and unstable as everyone says she is? She certainly shows some signs of it. And then similar to Oz, we're questioning what kind of person he is in the beginning of his story. Eventually, we get the answers to Oz's backstory in the 7th episode, and in Sofia's, it was the 4th episode. After that episode, for the second half of the season, we're wondering how deep will Sofia go? How consumed will she be by revenge and by the life of crime? She and Oz start to become very similar. Both are at war with each other, both are making chess moves to better their position, and both are definitely good at this game. But where we see them start to differ is with that one supposed person they care about. We are led to believe that the person Oz cares deeply about is his mother. If there's anything that can stop Oz from his quest for power, it's his love for his mother, right? With Sofia, that person is Gia. At first, she killed Gia's parents and then tried to justify it to her by saying they were bad people. Eventually, Sofia realizes that terror that she inflicted upon this poor girl. She killed Gia's mother, just like how Carmine Falcone killed her mother. She has no parents and she's living in a foster home, which to her is like another prison. Sofia eventually realizes what she has done. She realizes she put Gia in a prison just like her father put her in Arkham. So she tries to do right by it. She does have a heart. she is ready to leave the game. Sofia did have a care for a person, and that did, quote-unquote, save her. This inversely mirrors Oz. We hope that Oz's care for his mother is going to save him, but as we know, that doesn't happen. Oz doesn't really love his mother. He is as selfish as anyone can be, and he is rewarded for it in this world of crime. Sofia showed she had heart, and she was punished for it. Even though she did have another chance to leave, she just couldn't get over her revenge quest for Oz. It led to her downfall. Sofia tried to break the cycle, and she ended up right back in Arkham. Oz tries to perpetuate the cycle, and he ends up on top. This show isn't supposed to have a hopeful or happy ending. The finale is tragic through and through. Oz wins, and we learn he wins because of how truly awful he is, and Sofia loses because there was a glimmer of hope for her. Sofia's story was excellent. She was so captivating from beginning to end, and she also exemplifies the themes of the series. This series did so many things so great. So let's see what most people have to say and check out the reception to the series. The Penguin scored a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, along with an 85% audience score. On IMDb, the season scored an 8.6 out of 10. The highest rated episode of the season was the season finale, A Great or Little Thing, with a 9.5 out of 10, and the lowest rated episode was the second episode, Inside Man, with an 8.4 out of 10. The Penguin was an overwhelming critical success. The season was nominated for 24 Emmys this past year, making it the second most nominated show of the year. The series went on to win 9 of those awards, including Outstanding Leading Actress for Kristen Milioti as Sofia Falcone. As of right now, there are no official plans for a second season, but conversations have been had with Matt Reeves and the series showrunner Lauren LaFranc. Colin Farrell will return to play Oswald Cobb in The Batman Part 2 in October of 2027. So what did you think about The Penguin? Did you love it as much as I did? Did you actually dislike it somewhat? Let me know down below. Thank you everyone so much for watching another one of my videos. Don't forget to hit the Claude Squad, and I'll see you guys next time.